I read this
Mhm.
book. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It might be you might have read it. Alone with Others. It might have made me a Christian. One of the fundamental premises is that to be a human is to be fundamentally, inextricably, and completely alone,
Mhm.
while at the same time being utterly, inextricably, and completely with others.
Yeah, and generally not acknowledging that, which is
Right.
another
Right.
layer of madness.
To truly know who I am, like
Hmm.
in and out, like to actually know me the way I know me,
Yeah.
and to have somebody else sit in front of the scintillating heat of all of that and be like, yeah, you're okay, like that,
Hmm.
you know. And then and then of course I realized like that's the whole idea of Jesus. Um, there's a way for us to come together in all these various layers of culture and all this stuff that we do that can give rise to something that is more than, well, fundamentally what we could imagine, in the same way that my liver could not imagine that I would be what I am when it agrees to become my liver. However that works.
Absolutely. Yeah, that like drive to be a holistic organism that values the individual and the whole in perfect balance. Also, I think that's what transcendence is. I think it's a dimensional integration. It's literally geometry that allows this to happen. It's very bizarre to me to live in a world where there's seemingly no interest in achieving that. The reason I go into geometry and I talk about us being a shape is because the internal sense for me when I touch that place is coming to a form. There is a form that I view as the logos. That's why I always go to space and time because I imagine myself aligning with time as we're falling through it in the moment. There's sort of a completeness of spatial immersion that produces a temporal effect and actually slows processing time down.
Hmm.
And I feel like I'm actually extending the window within which I exist, and that gives
Oh,
me more time and dimensionality to play with the processes that I'm running.
do you do that, like you're like walking back to that at different points during the day? Like what does it look like?
Yeah, that was a big move for me when I became like more internally referenced because I think there's part of me that always, whenever I was reading others' words, we talked about this before. I don't have an academic understanding, not like putting chapter books in a library. I'm absorbing it as my own knowledge.
Yeah, yeah.
And I view this as another step further down that line where it's an internal thing that I'm touching and I know it through the craftsmanship of working it. It's a substance that I've worked and I understand how to form it because of the time spent, in direct relation to it. And
Hmm.
that for me was a big part of why I could start using the word God and other things because I was very uncomfortable with others' definitions of some of these things. But
Yeah.
once I had that internal reference, I was like, I know what I mean. I know what that is. I know where it is. I can find it.
Oh, I
It's a
see
real
what you're
thing.
saying now.
And
I
so
see
it's
what
just
you're
like
saying.
the internal reference was a requirement for me. I had to validate the internal in an environment that what my deepest, truest self was saying was outright crazy and just like would be ridiculed by society. And I knew that. I've known that for a long time. That's been a big struggle for me because it's hard to stand in front of the whole world and say you're wrong, this is doing that at the level of the soul. This is saying that humans, generally speaking, don't know what they are. We can know,
Yeah.
we can look and find it, but you do that internally. And
Yeah.
all of culture is a giant waste of time. Like it's just a giant sea of people distracting each other because they're distracting themselves because no one wants to look at this. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of things you have to engage with to get to reality because it's not at all what we've been told, right? And so empowering that internal view and understanding that this is God, this is wisdom, I know this, and the external world does not. That is obviously a place where arrogance can come in. You got to be real careful with that. But it's also when that comes from the honest part of you,
Yeah, yeah,
It's a really interesting thing where you're like, wow, I actually need to stand behind what I know of wisdom. Like these are my highest values, and they're my highest values because I got myself out of the way.
mm,
If I'm not willing to fight for that, or like if I'm, there's, I don't know, there's been a part of me that's like bitter about having to engage the world in that way, but I feel like I'm losing that part of it and just accepting the responsibility of like, wisdom is real. This is what it is. This is how it works. We can break it down. Let's stop playing around. Let's actually do what we're supposed to do. Like ancient
yeah,
cultures knew this better. Why are we so far off track on the most important track?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel like I'm cutting my way out of a spider's web.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the reading of books and all the learning of people's, you learn these people's names because you get to know them, because you figure out what they understood and what they didn't understand, and how it turned you all upside down.
Mm-hmm.
Generally they're well-meaning people who did a really good job trying to figure out how everything works. And for whatever reason, they got a little bit kind of wrong, and that sent everybody barreling down a wild track. And it's
Yeah.
like you figure that out, and then you're resentful toward them for a little while, and then you realize that they're actually well-meaning, and then whatever. Anyway, the whole journey. But it's like, do you think that sort of all of it's just a little bit of a waste of time? Like when you get to the bottom of it, you're like, man, we just really didn't need to go down any of these paths.
Yeah. That's what hurts me so much about humanity is like we've killed each other. And when you look at all of human history, it's just a giant translation error. Like just people not understanding each other at all and thinking when you say this word, you mean this. And it's like, no, we're actually different language models that are just like competed on this level that isn't even connected to reality. So like all of our decision making has been on this surface level, and there's been the iceberg under the water the whole time. And it's just shocking to me to realize that like we actively seem to just want to stay above the water more than anything. Like regardless of how bad it looks, the worst thing would be to look at reality.
I noticed that so many people do this thing where they say, you know, well, I don't hate modernity though, because look at all the good things it's done. And it's sort of self-evidently pointed to that, the fact that I have lights on in here and we can be talking over a computer screen and these sorts of things. Like that's actually one of the things like we wouldn't be able to have this conversation right now. I'm grateful for this.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't find that to be self-evident. Like it might actually not be better for us to be having this conversation right now. It might be better for us if we lived next door and actually spent time sitting around a campfire together and plowing each other's fields side by side and holding each
Mhm.
other's holding each other weeping when our wives passed away at the birth of our fourth child because we didn't have good enough health care. Now that
Yeah.
one
That might have
specifically
been.
sounds painful,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it might actually be better than what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Because one thing that working in medicine has taught me beyond a shadow of a doubt is that there is absolutely no, it is not self-evident to say that we are better off as human beings because we can extend our life so much longer with technology. We are
Yeah.
so damn obsessed with that idea, and it is one of the most horrifically painful things we've ever done to ourselves. Because I spent a lot of time talking to people about their deaths, a lot, and it sucks. It's really hard because people are not prepared to die. Sometimes they
Yeah.
are, and that's beautiful, but like our collective, yeah, oh man, okay, I could go on for too long about this.
I mean, yeah, it's just people running from realness, and nothing's realer than death, right? Like I think our lives only make sense in the context of death, and if you live your whole life not engaging that context, your life made no sense, and you get to the end of it and you realize that if you have a slower death, I guess, and it's too late. I think that's one of the tragedies that you probably get exposed to a lot, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We have to be at the end of the cycle here because there's just not a lot of road left. I think everyone is kind of aware of that. Right? Like we can't keep pretending that we don't know what's going on.